So uh, the way I see it, it's a few seconds of playful, not sexual behavior that was taken out of context. And it's a very good study on the power of propaganda and the power of social media. And it's a very important thing to have taken notice of, because many people, possibly millions of people, had their faith affected by this few-second clip, a few words quote. And for myself, my faith in the Dalai Lama is enormous. I have very, very deep faith and respect. It may even be, my faith in Dalai Lama may even be what I would describe as unshakable. That's how deep it is. And that's not based on superstition, or many people know His Holiness is one of my teachers. What does that mean? That means that I've made the effort to attend events with His Holiness the Dalai Lama on, I'd say, at least 20 occasions. And on those 20 occasions, I have often known organizers of the events, and so, in events in the United States, I knew a lovely nun, Sarah Thresher, Venerable Sarah. And the events in Australia, I knew the Sangha coordinators, Venerable Tenzin Chodron. I also had two nun friends, Venerable Jyotika, Venerable Dhammadina, who lived in Dharamsala for a period of years, who used to help train the new foreign nuns in a training program. And often when I attended the events with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I've been sitting on the stage 5 or 6 meters from him, many hours a day, sometimes 3, 4, 5, or on a couple of occasions, 10 days. I've shaken His Holiness' hands maybe 20 times. He has pressed his head against my head on 3 occasions. I have chanted the Mangala Sutta upon his request, I think 7 times. And so I know people who are close to His Holiness, and I have spent periods of time close to him, observing him and meditating near him. And I just don't believe that it is possible that the Dalai Lama is secretly a child abuser. It's not possible. Now, if someone was to show me credible evidence from several sources, then okay. It's important that we, even deep faith, we need to be informed by new information if it arises. So my own faith wasn't affected at all. The only thing that occurred for me was thinking how sad it is that after a life of service, that an impeccable life of service, and how hard that he has worked in terms of interfaith harmony between different religious faiths, in preserving Tibetan culture outside of Tibet, in helping many orphanages and schools and hospitals and all sorts of charities around the world. And that people could go from, this is a monk who I respect and love and see as a guru or an icon of spirituality, and that a few seconds of film clip and a few words taken out of context could cause people's minds to go from that to, this man is a child abuser. Now we've seen his real colors. This is who he really is. And if that happens to any of you, I really need to ask you, what happened? Like, why are you so easily swayed? I think I have some idea why. Obviously, in the Catholic institution, there was a lot of abuse, and the abusers often weren't punished. And so as those scandals came to light, a lot of people have very hurt feelings, justifiably. So a lot of priests, fathers were moved to a different area where they would abuse more children and move to another area where they would abuse more children. And so you had a kind of a generational, institutional, quite a big problem. So obviously that's a terrible thing. But with the Buddhist religion, the Lord Buddha laid down his training rules so that if a monk or a nun actually has sex with another person, from that moment, they're no longer a monk or a nun. So that's the rule. You don't get a bunch of senior monks getting together thinking, where can we send this one when nobody knows about it? Can we send this one for rehabilitation and bring him back and put him back on the throne? How do we hush this? The Buddha was so strict about this. I want to say he wouldn't give it an inch, but it's not that he wouldn't give it an inch, he wouldn't give it a millimeter. That's the actual rule. If a penis penetrates an orifice to the extent more than a sesame seed, that bhikkhu is no longer a monk. He's defeated. He's committed one of the offenses of defeat. And then similarly with a nun, if the member of a male enters any of her orifices more than a millimeter, if that was voluntary, that nun is no longer a nun. From that moment, there's no discussion, there's no moving them to another area, there's no covering up the scandal. Some people may have those offenses and may keep them quiet, but in my community, it's extremely rare. And I don't know of any monks. My community wouldn't tolerate that. So there are still good communities of celibate monastics whose celibacy is pure. So when I did a little bit more research, in rural Tibet, when Tibetans greeted each other, they actually stick out their tongues. So you need to keep in mind that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is, I think, 88, I believe he's in his 88th year. He grew up in eastern rural Tibet, like talking about 85 years ago. So he comes from a different culture. It turns out that grandparents used to, one of the ways they showed affection to their grandchildren was to offer them a sweet from their tongue. And so this is like a grandfatherly gesture to a child. And the words that he says are, this was the, will you suck my tongue? Apparently the phrase the Tibetans used to say, because in that part of Tibet, people are frightened of yakas, these giants and ogres. And it's a kind of a playful asking, as are you going to eat my tongue now? When the little boy or the little girl takes the sweet from grandma or granddad, they say, and now are you going to eat my tongue? And the little baby said, no, I'm not going to eat your tongue, granddaddy, I love you. It's playfulness. And so I think what's happened is the world has become so kind of saturated with porn that people project pornographic meanings onto things which are harmless. And so when Luang Por Chah says, in our life, we have to have what he calls meine, an awareness of meine, which means not sure in the Thai language, that whenever something's presented to you, before you grasp it and believe it fully, you have to have a little bit of this not sure awareness in your mind. Don't completely believe it yet. Do some investigation. So there are people from Tibetan culture who are explaining Tibetan cultures and traditions. And a recent clip I saw showed that the mother of the boy was within arm's reach of the Dalai Lama. And the particular angle that photo was taken on was deliberately to exclude her. The occasion was in a room full of children. So I'm telling you, you might find this interesting. I have listened to many interviews of abused children and child abusers. I've watched documentaries about the systemic child abuse in the Catholic institution, because as a celibate monk who is committed to his celibacy, I want to know the enemy. I want to know what happened to those people. How did this behavior become possible? You have to know your enemy. If you want to be a good monk for your entire life, you need to understand sexual energy. And you need to know what, and people think you put on a robe and all the sexual energy is gone. No, it's like putting a tiger in a cage. Sometimes the tiger roars louder. He doesn't want to be in a cage. You learn a lot about sexual energy as a celibate monk. You have to contain it. You have to channel it. You have to sublimate it, elevate it, turn it into a different energy. But you end up knowing a lot about sexual energy. And you end up knowing a lot about where healthy boundaries are. And so when I've listened to these interviews, it's because I genuinely want to understand, how could someone who's presenting themselves as a celibate person, a person of God in other religions, how could they do that to a child? And so it's a very interesting thing to understand the deluding power of sexual passion and lust, which popular culture often presents to us as love and the romantic myth. And we need to learn to separate love and romance from sex. I'm not saying that there isn't sometimes love present when people have sex, but I am saying that sexual lust is a force to be reckoned with that needs to be understood. So this boy was actually interviewed after the occasion, and the interviewer was asking him, what was it? I said, before this, that boy had to offer some gifts on behalf of the other students. He did that. And the Dalai Lama gave him a hug, and they had that little exchange with the mother within arm's distance and a room full of teachers and pupils. So I just want to say this. Sexual predators do not prey on children in the presence of their parent. And they don't do it in public with cameras everywhere. So when you see that image, you need to understand this was taken out of context. Typically, a sexual predator will abuse vulnerable children who don't have powerful parent figures. Orphanages, kids from broken homes, mothers working 2 jobs, not being able to keep much of an eye on the kids. Those are the kids that sexual predators find normally, in my experience of the interviews I've listened to. So the boy was interviewed, and before this, it was question and answers time. And this little boy said, I've got a question. And said, what's your question? Dalai Lama says. The little boy says, can I give you another hug? That was his question. So he'd already had a hug with the Dalai Lama, and he wanted to have another hug. So the little boy is not feeling abused. The little boy loves the guru. And then in the interview afterwards, says, what was it like when you pressed your head against the Dalai Lama? He says, so much positive energy. I can't explain to you. That's why I wanted another hug. I cannot explain to you the goodness and the positive energy I felt. I feel so blessed. And the mother was there. How do you feel? Oh, it is such a blessing for us that His Holiness came and blessed our school or training center, skill sharing center or something. So really completely taken out of context and really completely used as propaganda against the Dalai Lama. And so it's a really good lesson. Take note of it. Look at the power of media. There are people out there who are willing to lie, to misrepresent, and to, for the sake of shares, likes, drama, and really develop some of this Lumpur Cha, my before you get a fixed perception, before you throw away something precious quickly, do some research, consider deeply. And, the Dalai Lama can take it. The Dalai Lama can take it. But the people who are criticizing him, the millions of people who decided in a few seconds, oh, he's not a saint, he's actually a child abuser, those people did not make good karma for themselves. When you project onto a pure being who serves all beings selflessly, that person is evil, you are making obstructive karma for yourself with regards meeting teachers in the future. So be very careful. And of course, if more evidence becomes known to us, rows of abused children start turning up with believable evidence, well, that's a different situation. But as I said, in the 20 occasions where I've drawn close to the Dalai Lama and I've known people involved in hosting those events and in hosting His Holiness, if any of this kind of activity was going on, I would know about it. Because those people would know about it and they would talk about it. It's the kind of thing people talk about. So I don't believe there's anything to it. I love and respect His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I hope that you all may continue to be able to as well.